So economics, right? So I read an article that describes millennials as naive slackers, submissive wimps who lack ambition, can't concentrate, have short memories, unfit for corporate life, and so on. So what do you guys think is the difference between us and you? And if there is something better, is there something better that you have to offer in terms of economic liberation?
I don't think like being fit for corporate life is a necessity, to tell you the truth. As far as what you just read, anyway. The generation above me, my parents, of course, it was either you were a doctor, you were a lawyer, or you were an Indian chief, basically, you know. And I was a creative and artistic person, and that didn't gel very well with my mother's and her generation's expectations of me. And so, as I raised my children, I allowed them to see and to use, you know, to your credit, you know, the availability of the worldwide internet to see what other options are out there. You know, the world is progressing in many ways, and you can have a career and a happy life in certain areas these days that you never would have thought of, you know, when I was being taught and encouraged into career choices. So I don't think that necessarily being unfit for corporate America is a problem for me, because we have seen in many different scenarios that that's not necessary. You know, I hate it, to tell you the truth. I've had corporate America jobs and I hate it myself.
But Lamar, I think the question is asking our generation, what do we expect of the next generation? What do we expect the millennials to do in terms of this economic, you know, growth? If they're not getting the corporate jobs, do they have any kind of other responsibilities economically to it?
Actually, so our question is saying, like, so if we are all these things, you know, slackers, submissive wimps, or we lack ambition, right? Or, you know, have short-term memories, you know, all these words that have been used to like describe us, right? So the first question is, so what do you guys think in terms of whatever workspace it is? It could be corporate, it could be in the arts, whatever it is. What do you guys think are the key differences between us? And is there something better that you guys have to offer in terms of economic liberation?
They didn't teach us those kinds of things when I was going to school. As far as, you know, they didn't teach us how to balance, even basically balance a checkbook. I know we don't really use checkbooks anymore, but you understand what I'm saying. You know, financial things, they didn't teach us, even in home economics class, they didn't teach us about financial planning. They didn't teach us about building wealth and all those kinds of things. You know, if we learned it from our elders who were wise in those areas, you know. So I would, and again, I can really only speak from personal experience, but the people that I have interacted with in your generation in general, they have a lot of good ideas, but they don't just buckle down and do it, you know, or they've got a lot of different places they want to experiment in or experience, you know, but a lot of times I feel that there's a resistance to some things that are tried and true from our generation as far as building wealth, you know. I know we're talking about building up ourselves as men of color, but the rich white folks that I know always talk about real estate, you know, as far as building their wealth. And that's not really something that I've felt is important in your generation. It seems like I see so many people trying to be the internet millionaires, you know, the YouTube millionaires and things, you know, and some of that stuff can come crashing down. You know, we were taught to have a foundation, you know, some basic things. So I think that's what the difference that I may see is that some of the basics, I feel like your generation is trying to rework some things that just worked.
Brock?
That's a really good question. I have an example. So growing up in I don't know if you guys are really, really hip hop heads or not. I hope you guys are. So you get this reference. So growing up in the 90s, you know, that was like in the 10th grade or whatever the case may be. I remember when my favorite rapper, Method Man, Redman, Biggie Smalls, all them, they didn't have the internet. So they would have to literally go to record stores, meet and greet. Your A&Rs out there throwing up posters. You know what I'm saying? That's how you got to get really, really familiar with your favorite artists. You know what I mean? I mean, you literally got to meet them face to face. I think that work ethic is lower with the millennials. Not saying that what you guys are doing is wrong. This is 2020. You know what I mean? But I think we grew up where we had to get our hands dirty. We had to get down and get dirty with everything we did, especially being African American. You had to work 3 times harder than your counterpart. So that's what I see. You know what I mean? Like I said, once again, I have 2 adult children. The thing is, I never gave them anything. You know what I mean? If they wanted a cell phone, they had to work for that cell phone. You know what I mean? If they wanted a car, I told them, hey, I would come off half. You save half, and I would double that. You know, and I would come off with the other half to get whatever you want. But the thing is, I wanted to make them understand the true meaning of work. You have to get your hands bloody to work. So even though there's a lot of avenues that the millennials can go down now to make money, hey, like I said, once again, hey, make your money. It's just, I think the work ethic is a little different now. I won't say it's worse. It's just a little different. But to that, I mean, like brother Donovan, I mean not Donovan, but Lamar said, I mean, everybody want to be internet rich. You know what I mean? They, you know, that saying by Mayweather, you know, everybody want to get to the top, but they don't want to do the work to get there. You know what I mean? And that's how I look at the millennials now.
All right, brother, thank you. So what I hear, man, from at least both of my team squad is that Lamar speaks to that you have multiple pans in the fryer or multiple dishes going at the same time without choosing a specific area, not to limit the other ones, but to choose an area that you can use or generate as your career. And I think, Brock is saying that, the work ethic. So I agree. I think if any advice, I don't know where he read that article from or where you got it from, but, I think the idea is that our parents taught us or forced us into having a strong work ethic, and they may not have taught us everything. But what we have learned along the way is to kind of choose something that allows us to ground ourselves, and then all the excipient things around we do. There has to be some kind of source base that generates your source of income that gives you the freedom to do all the other free things. What I feel your generation does is that you have so many different avenues to choose from. You haven't narrowed it down to something that you can make enough economic, financial security on that allows you at the same time to have the flexibility to do the other things you want, right? And when we suggest that, it's infringing on your right. And I don't think it's trying to infringe on your right, but that responsibility, though, I think, I don't want to just say that. I feel like you're resistant to hearing that because it's kind of like, the parent telling me what I need to do and I need to be free. And that's why I was saying in the opening statement that you chose social freedom over prudent planning, right? And I'm not saying they shouldn't be mutually exclusive. I'm saying that you can have your social freedom at the same time, but also prudently plan how to economically for your future. 401k plan, savings accounts, but shit like that. I never knew, my parents knew shit about that until I learned that from corporate world, which is generally from someone who was white. But we don't teach that economic kind of foundation to the next generation. And I'm not sure you guys are really as open to accepting that because you want to have, I joke about this. I say you want to pray to the yoga god, but I just see that you got to find, and I'm not trying to tell you what careers to have, but there's some cruel realities going on right now. There's increasing rent There's increasing rates. It's not getting cheaper to live in the world, right? So if you don't choose a profession that allows you to navigate in the ever-growing world, right, or help to change that thing so to equalize it out, you'll always be a step behind, right, is my thing, a few steps behind. So I'm asking the next generation that narrow in on something that you figure that you can create, some kind of financial security or diversity with. Allow yourself to move on. That's just my piece of it. So I'll allow you guys to have a response to that, and then we can go to the next question.
Go ahead, Donovan.
I have a response. First, the real estate, yes, right? And all these means of doing it. But to pull a stat, or like basically Black people's home ownership from 1968 to 2008 has not increased. It is like 0.4 or something like that, right? So, and that speaks to one thing you were saying, Pharaoh, is like the previous generation didn't teach you, right? And I think that is one of the largest obstacles in the Black community, is this exchange of information from the previous generation to the next, right? But with that, so that's like a deeper issue, is this communication from generation to generation. However, to go back to, I love like that you brought up Wu-Tang, because they have always messaged and spoke about economic empowerment. And one of the things they always said was diversify your bonds, right? And that diversifying your bonds, speaking specifically about having IRAs, Roth accounts, all those things. But also we took that in a way of but like Pharaoh spoke to it as a critique, that we have so many different kind of interests. So I think what we heard is diversify your bonds, but since we don't have that access yet, we're diversifying in what is able and what we have. And so we're doing this, we're doing that, and we're doing that. And I feel that like, you're saying that like we need to pick a lane or pick something, which is true, can be done as well, but also the same, that work ethic that you had of people going from record stores and brick and mortars and selling their CDs, that don't hate the player, hate the game. Right now, the game has changed, where it's like, I don't have to go into brick and mortars and sell that CD. I have to go on my social media platform, show my audience who I am, and through that, I'm able to sell CD or sell my music and merchandise and all the other shit through the internet and through my social media platform.
Brother Donovan, I truly agree, and I wasn't saying that you guys have to do that, or you know what I mean. What I was saying is, back in the days, even Too Short sold tapes out of his trunk. You know what I'm saying? So he was an entrepreneur back then in the 80s. But what I'm saying is, the fact is that you guys never had to experience that side of the business. So a lot of times it's one of those things is, if I give it, like I tell my children, if I give it to you and give it to you and give it to you and never appreciate it, only time you will appreciate it is when you have to go out and get it yourself.
But that's
what I'm saying.
I feel we still are working hard and doing the same thing. It just doesn't look the same. It looks like being on your phone and recording yourself and getting your stuff out, because you can't get a record deal now. Before, if you meet the right person and like whatever gatekeeper you impress, and they'll put you on, they'll sign you to a deal, and they'll get you out through their disbursement. Now you have to come to those record execs and those gatekeepers with a following of 15,000 people already. You have to show them what you already started and are doing by yourself. And so they'll see, okay, this artist is a good investment. So right now the game has changed. So that same work ethic that you were speaking of is still happening. Like if you want to be on, those rappers today are not passing out CDs but they're posting all the time, and they're dropping videos and they're dropping new music. And so that work ethic is still there, it's present, but it looks different. And so and now no one's giving the artist today anything. I completely concur with you, Brock, that by giving to someone, you're going to spoil them and they don't know that appreciation of hard work. But I'm saying our generation is working hard because there is no map in today's like, oh, you got to do this and that. Like the game has changed. So whatever happened previously is not effective anymore. And so now we are on the brink of having to adjust to the game changing. And so now we have to work in a different way.
Yeah. So Donovan, I don't discount that, and I absolutely agree that the game has changed. My issue is this: that the game has changed, but the amount of people that it is affecting has not. Right? So the majority of people aren't going to be superstars. I think it creates a false narrative for those who aren't going to be superstars, who aren't going to be. Now the superstars that had to do the hard hustling now can use social media to hard hustle. And it's brought along a couple other more people, but the majority of people aren't going to be rich. The majority of the people are able to have, their social media as the platform to do branding. The majority of people are using that platform just as a communication tool, which I agree brought too much privacy shit on there, but it's not changed the plight of the culture in general that we. The game has changed.
Because the system is.
I'm okay with that. No issue with that. But it's not. We haven't progressed as a people. Yeah, even though the game has changed, and I'm saying that I want them. You ask me what is it that we're asking you to do? I'm asking you that, yes, it's an independent platform. That's your choice, like the scribe said. But his thought process is all about my individuality and my own choice. I'm asking you, if we're going to bridge this gap of information, then I'm asking you that you have to weigh a little bit more heavier your responsibility to your culture in respect to your independence. I'm asking you to do if truly we're going to pass this baton on where the knowledge is going to progress, I'm asking you more so than doing this thing for entertainment or purposes of that sort to then, hey, I'm saying that now we have a larger communication platform. That's why I agree globally that technology was a great communication tool to expand that piece. I don't think we're using it for that way.
No, but we weren't using it, but like, so to agree with you, to your point, right? The idea that most people are not going to be successful, for sure. But it's the same group, the same percentage today versus 30 years ago of people believing that they're going to be the next thing, that they're going to be the next, celebrity or the dream or all that. So I feel like, yeah, more people I don't feel more people or the more percentage of people are trying to become like these stars than in the past. Yeah, I think that if people want to be professional entertainers, they're going to do that. You know what I mean? But now the social media platform hasn't changed that. It just shows a magnifying glass on what is already happening. So if you feel not enough of us are committed to Black liberation, it's the same amount of people and niggas that weren't committed to it like 20 years ago. And 30 years.
That should change though, right? I'm saying that I wouldn't advocate for a status quo. I'm not asking for shit to be the same. I'm not promoting it for that. But your point is good. And I'm going to stop with your point so I can ask our question to you guys. Yeah?
Well, let me let Mikhail speak. I think he had something to say.
Okay, go ahead, Mikhail. Go ahead.
Yes. So I just kind of want to address, I feel like we have to take into consideration, right? Like what this generation of millennials was confronted with, right? If you look at, the timeline where we started to enter the job market, right? That was 2008. The average millennial went into the job market in 2008. And what happened in 2008? A whole global crash of the economy, right? So, and if you actually even do your own research, you can find out that this generation, millennials, actually went by what they were told to do more so than any other generation. We have more education. We have more college graduates than any other generation. But what did we really get from that, right? What success that was promised to us was actually delivered when it was said and done? We had to actually repeat the same cycle of just surviving on a paycheck to paycheck basis, which is what a majority of us are still doing to this day. So
yeah, because you choose fields like yoga and veganism and other shit that doesn't gotta make you any money to survive in. I mean,
I would have to say that's pretty ignorant, actually, right? Because what you're not really like paying attention is like the market that has opened up for those, disciplines. You're still thinking of those disciplines from like the 1980s, like, kind of like perspective. But like so much.
Yeah, but you're not making survival money. It's not ignorant in the sense, like if you're still your generation still like you live together. You're not making the same amount of cash in a growing economy. Like your inflation rate is not matching your needs. So say you are, say more people are going vegan. No issue with that, right? And say you've chosen to have that profession, but you're not getting paid enough money to sustain yourself in a high rising economy. It doesn't match. There's no match between them. It's the poverty level. The poverty level for our race and our people and our men are at the same or worse, right? That's not a good indication that because also that change socially makes it better.
But when you speak about when talking about our advancement or our level of success as a community and as a people, it is not in any well, I don't want to say any, but is largely not our fault. It is white supremacy and that shit, right? That that changes all that, right? However,
Rock, get him. Get him, Rock.
Get him. Because when you're talking about the algorithms of which we're utilizing social media and certain things allowed to become more popular, the gatekeepers are still largely white people, right? And because
are you that impressionable? Are you that impressionable that you can't decide for your home?
Hold on, Pharaoh. Let's let Mikhail finish his point. He wasn't done yet. Hold on, guys.
All right, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
I'm sorry, brother. You got me hyped, man. Sorry. Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
But so basically the point that I was making, right? Like you're making an observation about like how we're involved with too many things, and now we're not really like focused on one avenue or one source of income, right? But if you consider the facts that I mentioned earlier, how we were really like set up for failure. We did it by the book, we did everything right, and we weren't able to reap the benefits that we were promised, right? So with that condition, and also the fact that the world is constantly changing, commerce is constantly changing, a lot of different opportunities are opening up. If you're a millennial in that sort of like space, what you would think to do is, hey, I don't know what option is going to be safe. Even the option and the route that I was told to be the most secure turned out to be just like a hoax, right? So now what I have to do to make sure that I'll be able to invest my time and energy in a productive manner is to actually just hustle. And that is actually like a mentality of hustle. We're hustling on money things. What?
Rock, get him.
Wait, let me finish my point before Rock gets it.
Get him right now, right? Get him right now. Get him right now.
Don't worry, Mike. I got your back, bro.
Thank you, Donovan. Yo,
got you.
It's about to be black on black right here. Yo, but in all seriousness, the point that I'm trying to make is that, of course, we're not saying that we don't shoulder any blames. We don't have, any hands in the fuck up that is happening, right? But if you actually paying attention to what we've been able to inherit, right? And start with the fact that we weren't financially literate. And still, the majority of us don't know how to actually start a business, operate a business, do our own taxes and all that shit, which is the most basic stuff to be able to survive in this system. And the conundrum of it is that, you go to school for 12 years at least, if you finish high school, and you come out of it with no understanding or knowledge of how to actually thrive in this system, right, and how to actually make money in this system, right? And as long as that cycle continues, then nothing is going to change. We're going to have the same percentages of unemployment. you know, like the same percentages of home ownership and all that stuff, because ultimately we're not really trained to turn our resources into like, you know, viable like sources of income.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We're gonna end it off with that comment. Sorry, Brock, but I'm gonna let you guys pose your question. Go ahead, Pharaoh.
Oh, Brock was so ready though.
I'm gonna lend a couple minutes of my time to Brock first to address that, and then I'll address the question. Go ahead, brother.
Hey, I just wanted to say, welcome to being Black in America.
Right, duh.
Because how we grew up, we went through the same thing. So I totally agree with you. The knowledge has to change. I totally agree. But the thing is, it's not. I mean, it's almost like you guys are wanting to blame us or blaming the older generations because you guys are not getting to where you want to go. It's not our fault. Just like I can't blame my father and my grandfather for not being where I wanted to be. So that's the whole thing. I mean, so I tell my kids, I have a 22-year-old son. I tell my son, you know what? I can only give you what I know. I don't know what I don't know. You know what I mean? But I do understand finances, thank God. So I taught him a little bit. So hopefully he can expand on that. But the thing is, like I said, once again, it's almost how you're expressing is almost like you're blaming or almost like an entitlement.
No,
you're blaming us because you're not where. Because you just got done saying you went to school because you were promised to do this and get this. That's life. That is life. You know what I mean?
But we were promised by the generation, the older.
Yeah, but nobody takes promises like that, though. Promise. How could I promise you a certainty? Right? It makes no sense to say I promise you.
No,
you know we can't guarantee that.
But
right?
Hold up.
No.
Like talking about education, right? Like in the same way Lamar was saying, he wasn't taught the basic life skills to survive, and the same thing is happening today. We're not being taught how to do any taxes or anything like that. But the system of education is perpetuating the status quo of white supremacy, of not giving the masses the tools to advance in society, just to perpetuate what's going on, create customers, not sellers. You know what I mean? But in terms of the response, I feel some of the blame when it comes to the previous generation. You said you can't teach what you don't know, and I completely agree. But there is a lack of general knowledge to what you probably do know and don't share. And like when it comes to
what are you doing now?
The idea, like this generation is more transparent.
I think that goes to the point.
We share more, we talk more. And a lot of what I know currently about finances, I had to go on the internet, figure that shit out. I didn't learn from previous generations of my family. You know, for example, my grandfather, a hardworking fireman all his life. He retired, he saved money, he bought his house in cash, all that. But he didn't share that blueprint of what his own knowledge and experiences. He didn't really share that with any of his grandchildren or even his children. And so we had to kind of like figure that shit out. And now I'm asking questions and figure out, he knows, like, damn, how did you even do that? Buy your house cash on a government job supporting a wife and 3 children.
Hey, brother,
what tools did you have?
Brother Donovan. But the thing is, it's kind of like what you said earlier when we were talking about Wu-Tang and Method and all that. The game changed. So what happened, what made it good for him may not make it good for you. So that's what I said. So I can only give you what I know. So if that's not going to be relevant for your day and age, you have to learn yourself. But you can't blame people. That's the whole thing. Your generation wants to blame people. All
right, brothers. I love the discussion.
Because the next generation
let me chime in.
It's been amazing. Hold on. Let me get to the next question because I love that this dialogue is going this direction. But let us ask the economic question to you guys because I feel your question ended up putting you guys on the defensive, right? So let me put you a little bit more on the defensive, right? Let me help you out with that piece, right? So African American men have historically been economically disenfranchised in this country since the inception of slavery into current. Racial disparity, education, and opportunity have played a vital role in maintaining the status quo. Do each of you feel, as millennial men of African descent, that you have a responsibility to choose career paths that will change the financial narrative for our culture's future generations?
What the fuck?
Ask the last question again. So
Okay.
So
No. I'm not saying what the fuck because I didn't understand your question. I'm just like taken aback by the question. So, but anyway, Donovan, go ahead, bro.
Wait, I want to hear the last part.
Do I need to repeat it again? Because I know sometimes it's going to be a little slow.
Repeat it, yeah.
Right, you should have to repeat it.
Oh, wow.
We slow, is that what you said?
Wow.
Okay.
let's go.
And I'll put my glasses on.
As he puts on his glasses, it's going to come out slow as he puts on his glasses.
Just a little slow. I mean, you know, right? Remember you said earlier on we mature at different rates. So African American men.
We're gonna need a part 2.
African American men have historically been economically disenfranchised in this country since the inception of slavery into current. Racial disparity, education, and opportunity have played a vital role in maintaining this status quo. Do each of you feel, as millennial men of African descent, that you have a responsibility to choose a career path that will change the financial narrative for our culture's future generations? If yes, why? If no, why?
Is you gonna be a credit to your people or not?
Yes. One, right? If I choose because I'm black in America and I'm set in whatever I do professionally to put money in my pocket and build my wealth is going to affect future generations, i.e. my children and my children's children. So whatever it is I do will be for the advancement of black people, right? Because of looking at my family alone, that is for that. Is there also an ability to, in addition to whatever career outside of my family and bettering further generations of my personal family, do I have a duty to contribute to the advancement of the black community at large? I feel yes. Personally, yes. I feel that as an individual, as a human being, you have a responsibility, particularly a black human being in America, you have a duty to enrich yourself and enrich your community. I feel that people need to do that all over. However, whatever it is I do, if I choose to be a teacher teaching Pan-African studies and teaching and black students specifically, yeah, I can do that. Or if I choose to have a business serving white women, fucking teaching Pilates and shit, but is putting money in my pocket, that is also furthering black advancement. So whatever it is I do, because I'm a black man and I'm a black person, I am contributing to the black community in whichever path, whatever I choose to do to generate that wealth.
I concur 100%. Exactly. That's the point. It's, to your question, right? Like, not only do I feel that responsibility to further the cause and break that cycle, right? In terms of not just the financial narrative, but the overall narrative. The narrative that we have about our history, the narrative that we have about each other, how we black people see each other even. There's a lot to be worked on and there's a lot to be changed. And
this is economic though, focus. Yeah,
but that's actually the point that I was going to make next, right? There's a way to fight for, equality, and there's a way to really further the cause without necessarily becoming like a Jay-Z or a billionaire yourself, right? Like Dr. Martin Luther King didn't have millions, right? But he was still able to fight for the rights of working people. He was still fighting to make sure that everyone will be taken care of and they would have a good start to actually follow their path and follow their purpose, right? So I feel like the focus should be on that. It shouldn't just be to enrich us materialistically, because if that's just the mentality, we can do that in a way that is not really conducive to our goals.
Mikhail, we're talking about economics in this segment, right? Of course, there are other areas. You can't use the other areas as defaults not to focus on economics right now. When we get to
that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, the point that I'm making is, in order to actually really empower ourselves economically, the question has to go even deeper than that, right?
If don't tell me how to ask my question, bro.
Okay, so
ask my question.
I think
my question is, should you choose a career path, right?
Okay.
That's what I'm saying, though. Exactly. That's what I'm saying, though. The career path that I've chosen, right? Regardless of what that is, right? The fact that I'm actually able to make a living off of it, I can actually have a positive impact on other people's lives. And
how is that? It's just you, though.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, right?
Hold on. Let me finish my thought. You're seeing fortune and wealth and economics just based on like dollar signs, right? But real wealth actually goes even deeper than that, is the point that I'm making.
Okay, and what point is that then? Because you do need money. No matter what you say, you don't have to value economics, but the point is that it makes it real. You need to use it. Now, I don't have to put all my happiness into money, but the reality of our life is that you need it to survive, and there's no way you can get over that. So I'm asking, how do you pass generational wealth back to other people? You can be esoteric. You can be altruistic in saying that, I should think about other things besides money. And yes, I agree, but you needed to survive. And I'm asking your generation, how are you settling that deal to make sure you pass that generational wealth on to the future generations? Do you need to choose a career? Yes or no? I'm not saying that, but argue your point in terms of helping financially. Don't argue against the economic piece of it, right? Because I think
that's not what I'm arguing against, though. I'm actually addressing the question on a broader scale, is what I'm trying to do. And what I'm actually saying is that, of course, that is a necessity, and that should be like a priority for all of us, right? But in order to pass down that generational wealth, every single Black person in America has to be like a millionaire?
I'm asking you.
Yes, that's how I'm answering your question with a question. My answer for that would be not necessarily so, right? What we need to do is to come together to build a system that will make sure that everybody will get their dues. You know what I'm saying? And it's like we're trained to operate in a capitalistic sort of like mentality, like each person for themselves. And even our ideas of passing down that generational wealth is limited to just the people in our family line, right? It's not really taking consideration of everybody else who's not like, there are like so many other Black people that are not necessarily related to me directly, right? But their lives are being impacted by the same things, by white supremacy and all this, things that have been put in place to affect us negatively, right? So in order to actually like overcome that and to turn the system around, what we need to do is attack the sensibilities of the system that we trained to think in terms of, and not just like, enriching our own like, economics and just hope that will do the work. Because I feel like that's not going to cut it.
I fucks with that, right? And now I was asking, so how do we get your I don't think you may be a novel piece in your generation, but I don't really think your whole generation thinks like that. I think you can speak from that standpoint. I still believe your whole generation is thinking that collectively, right? You may be a nuance, and I grant it to you, but if you're not sharing that information, I think the Black agenda or plan is absolutely fucking what we need. But there's never been a collective plan. There's individual pockets. I want reparations. I want this other piece of it. I want this segment of it.
But you're always going to have that. Like, Black people are not a monolith.
And we're going to be right here, though. We're going to be at the same space for years. It never progressed as a group.
What I would agree with that, right?
Country, but we're not a monolith. And, like, even on this, like, we have different experiences. We may have different priorities or different ideas of what's going to push us forward. But so we don't have anything unless we create a culture in which we share values and what's important. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, okay, what do we need to do to instill these values in ourselves? But like the thing is, we can't right now. We're not a collective in terms of talking about, oh, the things that affect you. Okay, some of those things don't affect me, but the things that do affect me, we have to see what we have in common in order to build a plan. Otherwise, it's just like, it's impossible to unite a people who have all these different ideas and shit like shit. I don't agree with you, and I don't agree with you. Well, where can we go if we don't agree? So we have to find the common ground in which we can build and say like, oh, this is the things that are important, and we have to pass this knowledge down. Or, you know what I mean? Like when it comes to economics, we have to at least share the idea that you have to become stable. You have to survive, become stable, and then the idea of producing and thinking for the future is a new idea to Black people, relatively speaking, because we've always just been surviving since we got here. Mm-hmm. So we barely have been free in this country. So we barely had the time to think about the future, and thus we had even less time of those who thought about the future convey the techniques and strategies to build for and ready for the future. Like so many of us are just new money. You know what I mean? So many, like the people, the rich Black people in this country are, when you look at the length of span of this country, is basically new money. So we are as a culture in a state of like, shit, we're getting this money, but what do we do with it? We don't know, because previous generations didn't have money to work with. We're all just surviving. So a lot of our survival techniques have been passed, like get a job or get a government job or do this. But however, there's more to the idea that whatever it is you do, make sure you're saving, make sure you're investing. Like those things are not being really shared because there hasn't been the opportunity for previous generations to do that because we've been so focused on surviving. Barely.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. Brock, do you want to say something?
No, I was about to say, since Brother Donovan is in the education field, make sure you make that a big part of that, especially having African-American students. And, you know, that's one of our biggest issues. I think that should be a big point in your teaching, because that's the only way we will become a collective, to have that one voice. Because like you said, and I know Brother Pharaoh and I spoke yesterday, we was talking about every Black person have a different agenda, kind of like what you spoke on, Brother Donovan. So until we have a one voice, we will never get what we want. They will never listen to us. So you're in that field, brother. I applaud you. I mean, all means, I applaud you.
Thank you.
Make sure you make that one of the biggest points to your students, man, once you become a teacher or go in the educational field, whatever the case may be.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. Amazing dialogue, amazing discussion. We're already an hour and a half in. We have 2 more topics left. So at this point, Scribe, let me ask you, should we break and meet back again and discover the other 2 topics? I love the dialogue. It's rich. It's great. It's things that we absolutely need. But talk to me.
It's up to the guys, really.
Gentlemen, talk to me. We still got politics and we got climate control. You guys still with it some more, or
I'm down. I'm down to go, but I have to get off the phone at 7:30 for another call, though.
Then that's not gonna happen, bro. It's only 30 minutes, and you know we took 2 topics.
We can go with one. You can go. You gotta choose one.
Y'all work.
Yeah, you can't. You can't have it all. So narrow it down to maybe like a question. You know what I'm saying?
I see.
If there's anything that I've learned from your generation, it's that I can't have it all, right?
Well, you guys like to think, though, right? You know, so if you get in your feels, if you get in your feels so quickly, you know, we spend time trying to navigate around
your emotion, passion, bro. It's
right?
passion.
Navigate around your
emotion. How about this? How about we say?
You know what I mean?
How about we say
rock to sleep and shit, right? Talk to me, Scribe. What you want to
about
we
we
got 30 minutes left. I think
the next 2 questions for part 2, you know. And we'll figure out another day to tackle those 2. Because I think we covered a lot of ground with these, you know. I have almost 2.5 hours of us, doing this. Yeah, got all the content. So appreciate you guys.
All right.
Yeah.
That's dope.
That's what's
So,
up.
gentlemen, let me say this. So I want to appreciate the dialogue today. It was rich. It was great. It was fiery. It's the shit that we actually need to come back to. There's 2 additional topics that I think we need to re-meet again, this same team, right, to carry that on. Because I know people are going to listen to our first portion and going to want to know how we close that shit off, right? Right. So I want to thank you guys so much for being honest. I don't think there's any winner out of this. I think the idea for us to exchange ideas, I think that's the key with dialogue, is the purpose is to exchange ideas. And at the end, I think we're moving or migrating toward understanding of this collective Black agenda or agenda that we need together. So let's discuss the other 2 points when we come back. So what I generally say in closing our podcast, though, so Scry, rock with me. Awaken to the past, woke to the current, stay woke for your future. Help me, help you. Unfuck America. Let's go.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, guys.
Thank you,
Good talking
brothers.
to you. Appreciate y'all.